Volvo motors are well known for their reliability, serviceability, and their high quality. But a good tool is just one of the prerequisites for a good job. Another is the skill of the operator. Not only should he be a master at operating his machine, but he must also be good at maintaining it correctly. This is most important for the availability, durability, and productivity of the machine. This video therefore deals with both how you should operate your machine and how to maintain it. The video applies to the L70B and C up to L330C. The video is also a complement to your operator's manual. We'll give you the basic knowledge, and you can get further information in the operator's manual about each stage that we show in the video. The machines may have equipment and instruments which aren't installed on your machine, or some details may be in a different position. This particularly applies to the maintenance section. Refer then to the operator's manual for your machine. What can you as an operator do to work in a safe way with your machine? Carefully read the operator's manual and consider how you can avoid risks before you put your machine to work. Use personal protective equipment such as a hard hat, and make sure that you keep the cab free from objects which could end up under the pedals. The video is divided into 3 parts with the following contents. Part 1, presentation of the instruments and controls in the cab. Part 2, procedures before starting and daily maintenance. Procedures after operating. Further demonstration of the maintenance section in the operator's manual. And Part 3. We'll conclude the video by giving you the basic knowledge required for operation of the machine, how to use the machine in the best possible way, and hints on operating techniques for the most common jobs, such as operating with a standard bucket, rock loading, surface stripping, log operation, operating with pallet forks, snow clearing, and use of the material handling arm. Let's first have a look at the operator's environment. Test all of the adjusting possibilities of the seat. Find a position which feels good and suits you personally. If necessary, you can move the slide rails forward approximately 3 centimeters or a bit over 1 inch. The adjustable steering column can be set to many different positions. Move this lever downward to move the steering wheel forward, or rearward to the required position. Move the lever upward to adjust the height of the steering wheel. Also adjust the wrist support by the control lever carrier to give a comfortable and restful working position. If your machine is fitted with comfort drive control or CDC steering, you can easily lower the armrest and adjust it as required. Activate the CDC steering. The gear selector by the steering wheel should then be in neutral. When required, you can take over with the ordinary steering. If you use the ordinary gear selector, the CDC function will be deactivated. This also applies when you raise the armrest. Here you can find forward, reverse, and kick-down switches. This equipment is only intended for operating in short cycles and mustn't be used when traveling on the road or at speeds exceeding 20 kilometers an hour. Therefore, only 3 speeds forward and reverse are available with activated CDC for safety reasons. The instruments and the cab on the B and C series are positioned on 4 different panels. This picture shows the cab of a B series machine. How the C-series machines are equipped will be coming to shortly. Front left instrument panel. Center instrument panel. Front right instrument panel. And the right instrument panel. Here's the electrically operated parking brake. Always apply the parking brake after you stop the machine. Should you forget to apply the parking brake after the engine is shut down, it'll be automatically applied. When you restart the engine, you'll first have to apply the parking brake and then release it in order to move off. There are different versions of how the parking brake is operated. Refer to your operator's manual to see which applies for your machine. If a Contronic display unit is installed, lots of valuable data about the machine can be displayed. Any warnings will automatically be displayed on the first line regardless of the current display. The Contronic system also continuously displays information about speed, temperature, pressure, warnings, and in which gear you operate. The system also indicates when it's time for service. A new feature is also the ordinary clock. It also has many other functions which you can read more about in the operator's manual. If your machine is equipped with attachment brackets, you should use the two left switches when you want to change attachments. We'll refer to these switches in the section on operating. Beside, we have the switch for the preheating element and control lamp for activated CDC steering. On the L70B, the control lamp for the low gear is positioned here, and the switch is on the right instrument panel. And furthest to the right, we have the switch for the hazard flashers. On the C-series machines, we've moved the control lamp for the boom suspension system to here. It'll be easier to see while operating. Beside, control lamp for activated lever steering, CDC. Above, the control lamp for the transmission oil filter. See the operator's manual for further information on what applies when the lamp lights. On the L70C, the control lamp for low gear is positioned here. Next to it, to the right, is the switch for the hazard flashers. To the right, control lamp for automatic greasing system if your machine is fitted with such a system. On the center instrument panel is the speedometer. Next to it, the most important warning and control lamps. The central warning lamp flashes simultaneously with some of the control lamps, and additionally, in a few cases, a buzzer will sound. This red control lamp warns if the engine lubricating oil pressure is too low. If the lamp lights up and the central warning lamp flashes, stop the engine immediately and investigate the cause and have the fault corrected. If this control lamp lights, it's an indication of too low oil pressure in the transmission. Don't operate the machine, but investigate the cause and have it fixed. This red control lamp warns if the coolant temperature of the engine is too high. When the temperature gauge indicates within the red section, the buzzer will sound. Run the engine at low idling for a couple of minutes to lower the temperature. If the gauge still indicates within the red section, stop the engine and investigate the cause. If brake pressure is too low, or if one of the brake circuits is out of action, the control lamp for brake failure will light up. On the C-series, the buzzer will sound too. The machine shouldn't be operated until the fault has been corrected. This lamp indicates that the parking brake is applied, and if you try to move off, the buzzer will sound. In case of a fault in the primary steering system, you'll be warned by this red control lamp. The amber control lamp indicates that the pump of the secondary steering system is switched on. Operate the machine only for a short distance to a suitable lay-by or workshop to have the fault investigated and fixed. On later series machines, the symbols have been replaced to show steering wheels. The control lamp for the transmission lights up if the temperature is too high, that is, when the temperature gauge begins to move into the red section. Stop the engine and investigate the cause. Don't operate the machine until the fault has been corrected. The control lamp for the engine air filter lights up when it's time to change or clean the filter elements. The charging control lamp should be extinguished when the engine is running. Should the lamp come on, investigate the cause, otherwise the batteries will become discharged. The control lamp for the direction indicators indicate right or left turn respectively, depending on the position of the indicator control. The amber control lamp for the secondary steering indicates that the secondary steering pump has started as a result of a fault in the primary steering system. If the oil level in the hydraulic oil tank is too low, this control lamp will light. On some machines, a warning lamp for excessive axle temperature is positioned here. At a further increase in axle temperature, the buzzer will sound. Operate the machine in such a way that the brakes have to be used as little as possible. The axles will after a while cool down to normal operating temperature. The control lamp for preheating element. This lamp lights up when the preheating element is engaged. The control lamp indicates when the rotating warning beacon is switched on. When the headlights are on high beam, this blue control lamp lights up. And here's the control lamp which indicates when the working lights are switched on. When the differential lock is engaged, this control lamp lights up. Turn the ignition key to running position. This position works as a bulb test. A number of control lamps should light for 3 seconds. If any of the lamps should flash after this test, this indicates that there's an electrical fault in the circuit. At the same time, the 4 gauges on the instrument panel should indicate to show that they're in working order. On the front right instrument panel are the ignition key and the cigarette lighter. The ignition key has 5 different positions: off, stop, radio position, running position. If you turn the key further to the next spring-loaded position, the preheating element will be connected. And finally, the starting position. To the right of the ignition key, we have, from the left, the fuel gauge, in the middle, the temperature gauge for the engine coolant, and to the right, the temperature gauge for the transmission oil. On the C-series machines, we have to the right of the steering wheel the switch for the preheating. Next to the ignition key is the shift mode selector for the APS-2, Automatic Power Shift 2. We'll deal with how to use the different shift modes under the section Operation. Next to the operator's seat is the right instrument panel. The functions of the different switches will be explained gradually throughout these instructions. Furthest to the right on the panel is the dimmer switch for the instrument lighting and the hour meter. On the C-series machines, the cigarette lighter is positioned to the right of the instrument panel. If your machine is fitted with a secondary steering system, you can make a function test of the system. Turn the ignition key to running position 1 and keep this switch pressed down. This should cause the amber control lamp to light up and the secondary steering pump to start. Only steer for a couple of seconds, as this is sufficient for checking that the system is functioning. Before you carry out the test, make sure that no people are near the machine. In case of loss of power in the primary steering system while operating, the secondary steering will cut in automatically. Apply the brakes and stop the machine in a suitable place and have the fault fixed. The machine may only be operated or moved for a short distance when the secondary steering system is engaged. The climate control unit with controls and switches is positioned to the right of the control lever carrier. The climate control fan can be set to 4 different on positions. The cab temperature is controlled steplessly. If you move the control rearward, it'll be warmer, and if the control is moved fully forward, the heating will be turned off. With the recirculation control, you can have only fresh air from outside or select to have most of the air in the cab recirculated. If the machine is fitted with air conditioning, the switch is positioned here on the instrument panel. With this control, you can regulate to what extent the air in the cab is cooled. It's recommended to operate with the window and door closed. There'll be a slight excess pressure in the cab, which in turn means that the air in the cab will be less dusty. Keep the fan control in position 1 to prevent unfiltered air from entering the cab. For maximum cooling of the cab air, keep door and window closed. The heater control set to cold. Full recirculation and the fan at position 4. The switch for the air conditioning should be turned on and the thermostat control set to maximum cooling. When a comfortable temperature has been reached, you should lower the fan speed, preferably to position 2. Then regulate the temperature in the cab with the thermostat control. If you need to demist the windows or rapidly remove moisture in the cab, you should proceed as described above for maximum cooling, but in addition, the heater control should be set to warm. Lighting switches. In position 1, the parking lights will be on. Turning the switch to position 2 will turn on the travelling lights. With the dipper switch, you can select high or low beams. With the switch in position 1, the front working lights will be on. If your machine is fitted with additional front working lights, it'll look like this with the switch in position 2. There are corresponding positions of the switch for the rear working lights. As it's not allowed to operate on a public road with the working lights on, there's an amber warning light on the instrument panel. If your machine is fitted with a rotating warning beacon, the switch will be here. When the switch for the transmission disengage function is activated, the power transmission will be disengaged when the brakes are applied. With the switch turned off, the power transmission remains engaged, and this is the position which is recommended for most operations. It gives a smoother working cycle for all operations. The multi-function control to the right of the steering wheel has several functions. Headlight dipper, windscreen wiper with an intermittent action position, and windscreen washer. The rear window wiper is operated with this switch. If you keep the switch pressed down, the rear window washer will be engaged. The direction indicators and the horn are also controlled with the multi-function control. Later on in the section on operating, we'll deal with the function of gear selector control. To the right of the steering wheel, we have the control lever carrier for the working hydraulics. From the right, we have the lifting lever, tilting lever, and the lever for the third and fourth functions. The lever for the lifting function has 3 positions with 5 different functions. Lifting, lifting with boom kick-out, neutral, lowering, and floating. The automatic lifting function operates in 2 different ways. The detent position, and with this lever in position 1. Place the lever in the detent position and the lifting arms will automatically rise to the top position. Move the switch for the lifting function to position 2. Again, move the lever to the lifting detent position. The lifting arms will automatically rise to a pre-selected position and the lever will be kicked out to neutral. This is the so-called boom kick-out function. To engage floating position, lower the bucket and move the lifting lever to the front detent position. The tilting lever has 3 positions with 4 functions: tilting rearward with bucket positioner, neutral, and tilting forward. Activate the switch for the automatic tilting function, bucket positioner. With the switch in this position, the tilting lever will be retained in the rearward tilting position and the bucket will stop at a pre-selected angle. In the section on operating, we'll show how to adjust the bucket positioner. The switch and the lever for the 3rd and 4th function is used when the machine is equipped with attachment hydraulics. With this control, you can lock the control levers in neutral. Depress this switch when you want to engage the boom suspension system. The control lamp on the panel is on while the system is activated. If you're working with an attachment equipped with 3rd or 4th hydraulic function, which requires precise movements of the attachment, the boom suspension system should not be activated. On the C-series machines, there's a function selector for the boom suspension system on the right instrument panel. With this switch, you can choose between 2 different settings: gear-dependent or traveling speed-dependent boom suspension system. With the upper end of the selector switch pressed in and the system activated with the button on the gear lever carrier, the boom suspension system will be engaged in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th gears. The control lamp on the front panel will be on and light with a fixed green light. When changing down using kickdown, the function will be disengaged and the control lamp will be flashing. With the lower end of the selector switch pressed in and the system activated with the button on the gear lever carrier, the boom suspension system will be engaged when a certain speed is exceeded. The control lamp will be on and light with a fixed light. When the speed drops below a certain speed, the function will be disengaged and the control lamp will flash. It's also possible to operate the kickdown function from the control lever carrier. When operating downhill, you'll get an immediate downshift with this switch. We'll show how this is done under the section on operating. On certain machines, it's also possible to operate the forward-reverse shift from the control lever carrier. Refer to the operator's manual for further instructions. On the floor, we have the accelerator and brake pedals. Normally, the machine has only 1 brake pedal, which is fitted to the left of the steering column. However, in this case, it has 2 brake pedals connected in parallel, which is a legal requirement in some countries. During difficult working conditions, you can use the differential lock. Recommended use is described in the operator's manual. To the left of the operator's seat is the electrical distribution box with fuses and relays. Service and maintenance are important for your machine. We'll now show you what you as an operator can do both before and after your working shift. We'll also go through the importance of correctly carried out service and maintenance to guard against unnecessary stoppages. Injuries can also be prevented if the machine is kept in good working order. In all work with the machine, carefully follow the safety instructions. Various kinds of protective devices and many warning instructions can't entirely eliminate the risk of accidents. Use correct clothing and personal protection equipment. As an operator, you should read the operator's manual to reduce the risk of accidents. Be safety conscious and use common sense. An operator has to fulfill many expectations and requirements. They vary from country to country and from work site to work site. Consider local and national regulations applying to your work site in your country. Before you begin your work shift, you have to carry out a daily maintenance of the machine and certain procedures before starting. This is to make certain in what condition the machine is before putting it to work. Also remember that during all service, your machine should stand in the service position. You can read about this in the operator's manual. Check the engine oil level. The level should lie between the minimum and maximum marks on the dipstick. If you need to top up with oil, make sure that no dirt enters the engine. Don't overfill and use oil with the same grade as is already in the engine. The operator's manual lists which oils you should use. Check the condition of the tires. Too low tire pressure affects the stability of the machine. This will also cause more wear and lead to a shorter service life of the tires. After the first day's operation, it's important that you check tighten all wheel bolts. This applies to a new machine or after having changed a wheel. This should also be done if you fitted chains to the wheels. Check that there are no leaks, loose bolts, or loose bolted joints. Check the coolant level. The level should be between the maximum and minimum marks. Read in the operator's manual about which antifreeze mixture you need if you have to top up. Turn on the battery disconnect switch. At the same time, check lamps and lenses and clean them. Check in the level pipe that the hydraulic oil level is correct. If you need to top up, make sure that no dirt enters the system. Make sure that the machine is standing on level ground with the attachment on the ground when you're checking the oil level. Check that all windows and rear view mirrors are clean so that you have good all-round visibility. Don't forget to put on the seat belt. You should wear the seat belt during all operations with your machine. Before you start, check that the gear selector is in neutral and the parking brake is on. When you start the engine, make sure not to race it. Run it at idling speed for a couple of minutes to safeguard the lubrication of the turbocharger and that required pressures are built up in the respective systems. In cold weather, you should not load the engine before the various systems have reached working temperature. While warming up, check that gauges, instruments and controls are functioning and that all warning lamps have been extinguished. In cold weather, you should use the preheating element to aid starting. Read about that in the operator's manual under Starting Engine. To move off, release the parking brake, raise the attachment to carrying position and select a directional gear. At the end of the working day, the machine should be given certain aftercare. Make a habit of filling up the fuel tank to prevent condensation of water in the tank. When you've stopped at the place where the engine is to be parked, the attachment should be lowered to the ground, the gear selector moved to neutral, and the parking brake applied. Before you shut down the engine, allow it to run at low idling for a couple of minutes. to lower the temperature of the turbocharger. If the machine isn't standing on level ground, chock the wheels. Every 250 hours, check the oil level in the transmission. This is best done at the end of the working shift when the oil is warm. The engine should be running at low idling with the gear selector in neutral. The level should be between the minimum and maximum marks on the dipstick. On the L330C, you should do this every 100 hours here on the level pipe. This is the lubrication and service chart, which is also found in the operator's manual. Take great care to prevent dirt from entering any of the systems in the machine. Clean grease nipples before applying the grease gun. The lifting arms should normally be greased every 100 hours. If you're operating in a dirty environment, you should grease the lower bucket pins every day. Make certain that the grease oozes out on both sides of the bucket pins. On the L330C, there's no need for the operator to grease the lower bucket pins. Instead, the grease should be changed every 10,000 hours. This work should be carried out by an authorized dealer workshop. If you're operating in dirty or dusty conditions, the rear axle pivoting bearings should be greased every day. Make certain that the grease nipples are clean before applying the grease gun. Here, at least 30 to 40 strokes with the grease gun are required for the grease to ooze out. On the L330C, fewer strokes of the grease gun are required. The exceptions are the L70B and C, where the rear axle pivoting bearings are lubricated with rear axle oil, thus making this point maintenance-free. If the machine has become dirty during the work shift, it should ideally be washed. The flat cab floor makes cleaning easier. If you follow these instructions, your work will be easier and you'll feel greater satisfaction from working in a clean and well-serviced machine, as opposed to a dirty and poorly maintained one. Finish off by locking the door and walking once around the machine, making sure that everything is okay. Finally, turn off the battery disconnect switch. We'll show you now the best way of maintaining and servicing your machine in addition to the daily service. We've chosen to show the points which you as operator can carry out. Which oils you should use and when to change oils and filters and how to carry out certain adjustments you can read about in the operator's manual for your particular machine. Other repairs should be carried out by an authorized dealer workshop. Begin by placing the machine in the service position according to the operator's manual. If any work has to be carried out under lifted arms, make it safe by applying a safety support. Carefully read the safety instructions and rules given in the operator's manual. These are particularly important for your handling and maintenance of the machine. Take extra care when working with hot oils. Waste oil should be taken care of in an environmentally correct way. And remember, if you enter the machine, make sure to step on surfaces intended for this purpose and provided with anti-slip surface. Every 250 hours, the condition and tension of the fan belts should be checked. First, remove the fan guards. The belts for the alternator and the air conditioning compressor are not self-adjusting. Don't forget to refit the guards. After 250 hours, the engine oil and filter should be changed. Take extra care when you're working with hot oils. Fill engine oil in the filter before fitting it. Apply some oil to the seal as well. Check the seal if the filter retainer has a clamping device, as shown here. When the filter just touches the sealing surface, you should tighten the clamping device as far as possible counterclockwise. Then turn the filter a further quarter of a turn by hand. Then finally tighten with a suitable spanner at the clamping device. Look in your own operator's manual if you have a different kind of filter. You can read in the operator's manual about the conditions which have to be met if the 250-hour interval between oil changes is to apply. If any of these conditions aren't met, or if the machine operates in acid or particularly dusty environments, the oil should be changed every 125 hours. The fuel filters should be changed every 1,000 hours by an authorized dealer workshop. The water trap should normally be checked every 100 hours, but under certain conditions this should be done more often. Drain off sludge and condensation water. If air for any reason has entered the injection fuel system, consult the operator's manual under Bleeding Fuel System. The transmission breather filter should be changed every 2,000 hours. On the L330C, the breather filter is positioned on the transmission. Every 1,000 hours, or when the control lamp for the air cleaner lights up, the primary filter in the air filter should be changed or cleaned. Contact your workshop about how the cleaning of your filter is done. However, after the filter has been cleaned 5 times, it should be changed. The secondary filter should be changed every 2,000 hours. Never remove the secondary filter unless it is to be changed. When you've fitted the filters, check that the seal around the cover is serviceable. If you need to fill coolant, use original Volvo antifreeze. See the operator's manual for the proportions of antifreeze and water. Don't fill right up to the maximum level, as coolant expands when it gets warm. You should change the coolant every 2,000 hours, but if the machine is equipped with a coolant filter, a change every 3,000 hours is sufficient. The coolant filter should be changed every 1,000 hours. Check that the radiator isn't clogged and that hoses and connections are in good order. This also applies to the condenser of the air conditioning and the oil cooler for the working hydraulics. When required, blow clean with compressed air or flush through with water. Check the batteries every 100 hours. Top up with distilled water when necessary, and check that cable terminals and pole studs are clean and securely tightened. On the L330C, you should change the transmission oil filters every 500 hours and the transmission oil every 1,000 hours. The transmission and the cooling circuit of the brakes use the same oil. The coolant filter should be changed every 500 hours. On the other machines, the transmission oil filter should be changed every 1,000 hours and the transmission oil every 2,000 hours. The suction strainer, which is fitted at the bottom of the transmission, should be cleaned at the same time as you change the transmission oil. Make sure that you fill with the correct oil grade. See recommended lubricants in the operator's manual. The oil in the front and rear axles should be checked every 250 hours and changed every 1,000 hours. The oil should reach up to the edge of the hole, or not lower than 5 millimeters, or 2/8 of an inch, below the hole. The oil is drained from under the differential housing on the axle and from both hub gears. The L330C has an oil change interval of 2,000 hours for the front and rear axle oil. The oil is drained at the center of the axle and here at both hub gears. Make sure that the arrow is pointing downwards when checking and changing. The bearings in the lift arms should be greased every 100 hours. The lower bucket pins and the rear axle pivoting bearings should be greased every 50 hours. If the machine is operating under dirty conditions, this should be done daily. Read in the operator's manual under the heading Important when greasing bearings. The articulated frame upper joint bearing should be greased every 100 hours and the lower every 1,000 hours. On the L330C, you don't have to grease the lower bucket pins. Instead, the grease should be changed after 10,000 hours by an authorized dealer workshop. The same applies to the upper and lower bearings of the frame joint, where the grease is changed after 5,000 hours. The steering cylinders should be greased every 100 hours. The front and the rear propeller shafts should be greased every 500 hours. Don't forget to lubricate hinges for door, window and engine hoods. On the L330C, you should check the oil in the support bearing every 1,000 hours. At the same time, clean the breather filter, which is fitted on top of the support bearing. The oil should be changed every 2,000 hours. The ventilation filter for the cab should be changed every 1,000 hours. The clogging of the filter is entirely dependent on the working environment and should be checked at least once a week. The filter is best cleaned with a vacuum cleaner, as in this way the risk of damaging the filter is limited. The pre-filter is cleaned or washed where necessary in a soap solution and water. Change the filter if cleaning doesn't help. The air conditioning should be checked every 100 hours. Consult the operator's manual for what you can do in this respect. Check the oil level in the hydraulic system daily. The oil should be changed every 2,000 hours if the system is filled with engine lubricating oil. If the system is filled with hydraulic oil and the return oil filter is a glass fiber filter, the oil should be changed every 4,000 hours. Look in the operator's manual to see how it's done. The same oil tank is used for the working hydraulics, the brake and steering systems. The filler plug for the hydraulic system is positioned here. Under the cover is the return oil filter. On some models, there are two filters. The filter or filters should be changed every 1,000 hours. The C-Series machines are at the factory fitted with glass fiber filters, which should be changed every 2,000 hours. If you have an earlier type of machine with a paper filter, you can replace this with a glass fiber filter and increase the interval between changes to 2,000 hours. The breather filter for the tank should not be cleaned, but changed every 2,000 hours. Sludge and condensation water should be drained off every 500 hours. If you look after your machine, as we've now indicated, you greatly reduce the risk of faults and operating interruptions before the next service. Don't forget to restore the machine from the service position before moving off. We'll now give you the basic knowledge required for the most common loader operations. If you have a new machine, it's important that you operate it with extra care during the first 50 hours. Read in the operator's manual what applies during the running-in period. Always put on the seat belt for all kinds of operations. If you engage a gear when the parking brake is applied, the central warning lamp will flash and a buzzer will sound if you try to move off. The electrically controlled parking brake can be released only if there's sufficient pressure in the brake system. Our loader has automatic power shift and is easy to operate. The transmission has 4 forward gears and 3 reverse. When you shift between forward and reverse, don't pause with the selector control in neutral, but engage the other gear directly. If you operate with the selector in the A position, automatic shifting, the machine always moves off in second gear and then automatically shifts up towards the top gear. When you need additional power, push in the kickdown button and first gear will be engaged, provided the traveling speed is below 10 kilometers an hour or 6 miles an hour. On later type machines, the engagement of the kickdown is indicated by a short beep from the buzzer. The kickdown function is also available at the control lever carrier. C-Series machines are fitted with an automatic power shift system which has been developed further and is now called the APS-2, which allows the operator to adapt the gear shifting system to the conditions and type of work. The shift mode selector has 5 different settings, of which 4 are automatic. The automatic function is obtained in second, third and fourth gear. The machine moves off in second gear and then shifts up to the selected gear. First is obtained by using the kickdown function. The 2 light settings are suitable when working with a pallet fork or a material handling arm, or for light transports when a more gentle gear changing is suitable. The normal setting corresponds to the automatic position of the APS on the B-Series machines. The heavy setting is recommended for loading carrying work, particularly when working uphill and loading rocks or when excavating. With manual setting, you select the required gear with the selector control. However, the safety features of the automatic function are maintained. When operating downhill, you can push the switch for downshifting to achieve an automatic shift down by 1 or 2 gears, depending on the traveling speed and provided you don't depress the accelerator. This provides powerful engine braking, reducing the wear of the brakes. Never move the gear selector to neutral when operating downhill. If you keep the switch pushed in, the gear will remain engaged even when you increase the engine speed. When operating uphill, you can prevent gear shifting by keeping the switch for the downshift function pushed in. On very steep inclines, you should shift down early so as not to lose momentum. By utilizing the downshifting function of the transmission correctly, you will increase the service life of the brakes and reduce the oil temperature in the axles. In extreme cases, the warning lamp for the axle temperature may light up. If the amber control lamp lights up, it's a warning that the temperature is high. If you operate the machine calmer, the temperature in the axles will drop. In this way, you prevent the temperature from rising further, which would cause the central warning lamp to flash and the buzzer to sound. If your machine is provided with a Contronic display unit, a warning text will be displayed simultaneously with the other warning functions. It's recommended to engage second gear and use the kickdown function for excavating work. When the traction requirement is decreased and the speed can be increased, the kickdown button can be pressed in again and second gear is again engaged. This function concerns the C-Series machines only. Before you put the machine to work, you should check if the automatic bucket positioner function is correctly adjusted. Stand the machine on level ground and raise the bucket slightly off the ground. Activate the switch for the bucket positioner and tilt the bucket forward. Move the tilt lever to the rear detent position for tilting rearward and leave the lever in that position. The bucket will now tilt upward rearward to a pre-selected position. Lower the bucket and check that it is at the correct angle to the ground. If the bucket stops in this position, there's no need to further adjust the bucket positioner. If the adjustment isn't adequate, move the bucket to the correct position and adjust as follows. The adjustment is done here at the tilt cylinder. The engine should be turned off and the ignition key should be in the running position. Adjust the large bracket so that the indicator points stand directly opposite each other. Slacken the nut and push this bracket to its rear position. Activate the switch for the bucket positioner and move the tilt lever to the rear detent position. Now move the bracket forward and lock it with the nut when the diode is extinguished and the lever is returned to neutral. The adjustment of the bucket positioner has now been completed. Make sure that the sensor doesn't touch the indicator rod. There should be a clearance of 2 to 3 millimeters, or approximately 1/8 of an inch. For certain work, it may be advantageous to have a pre-selected height position at which the lift arms stop. The adjustment of this position is done in a similar way to that of the bucket positioner. A bucket correctly adjusted to the ideal bucket bottom angle contributes to reducing the wear, as the bucket then rests on the wear plates. It's also easier to penetrate the material, which in turn reduces the tire wear when the machine pushes the bucket into the material at the correct angle. We will now show you how to handle the bucket for gravel and stockpile loading. Make sure that there are no other persons within the working area of the machine. Before starting work, it may be a good idea to dress the worksite. This will increase comfort and productivity. About 1 meter away from the heap, you lower the bucket and push the kickdown button to engage first gear. With the bucket positioner activated, the bucket will be at the correct angle. Work the bucket into the material at the same time as you increase engine speed. Make small tilting and lifting movements with the bucket to keep an even load on the front wheels while filling the bucket. If this isn't done in the right way, the wheels will spin, resulting in a poorly filled bucket and extensive tire wear. As the operator of the loader, you decide where the transport vehicle should be placed. Indicate this by stopping the machine and raising the bucket over the spot where you want the vehicle to stand while loading. Make a signal when the transport vehicle is in the right place. By doing so, you also take responsibility that this is a safe place. Lower the bucket as far as possible over the transport vehicle when dumping the first bucket to reduce the impact the material has on the vehicle. The machine should be straight when the bucket begins to penetrate the material. To achieve high productivity, you should strive to make the work cycle as short as possible. That is, a short distance between the pile and the load receiver. The most suitable gear selector position for this sort of work is A or 2. When using C-series machines for short working cycles, we recommend that the gear selector should be in position 2 or 4, and that the shift mode selector is set in position normal or heavy. If your machine is fitted with boom suspension system, select the gear-dependent function. After you've dumped the last bucket, try and flatten out the load a bit and make a signal that the vehicle is fully loaded. We've now shown the basic technique for loading stockpiled material. When working with tough materials such as rocks, shown here, a different technique is required. For this tough job, a spade-nosed bucket is recommended, and special loading tires, which are designed to cope with this sort of work. This applies if the loader is mainly occupied for this type of work. Here it's particularly important that you keep the work site level and tidy. A sharp stone in the sidewall of the tire can easily become an expensive experience. Therefore, avoid operating right up into the material. Try to gather stones which are as small as possible for the first bucket load in order to damp the impact on the transporting vehicle of bigger stones later on. Here you have to plan the filling of the bucket carefully. You have to try to feel your way with the bucket in between and under the stones. Avoid loading either corner of the bucket. Work steadily and methodically, and above all, avoid wheel spin. On this even ground, you can operate in second gear and use the kick down when you penetrate the material. If the ground is fairly uneven, operate in first gear. On the C-Series machines, we recommend that the gear selector should be in position 2, shift mode selector set in position heavy. If your machine has boom suspension system, select the gear dependent function. Never operate at speed into the rocks. Instead, angle the bucket a few degrees forward and work your way carefully into the material. If a stone gets wedged, change the approach angle. As a rule, avoid approaching the material in the same tracks you used before. Read the face. In this work, the engine speed is of great importance. Too high engine speed can cause the wheels to slip. The large windows give you good control over what you're doing, even when the bucket is in the top position. Signal to the operator of the transport vehicle when it's fully loaded. However, it's important that you check that no stones can fall off the vehicle. In the operator's manual under the heading Bucket Operation General, you can read more about which bucket to use for different jobs. It's most important that you have the correct bucket to get the proportions right between the weight of the material and the maximum tipping load of the machine. Too large a bucket can make a machine feel sluggish and unstable. This will reduce the productivity of the machine as well. To achieve maximum penetrating force, approach the material with a straight machine. In this situation, the wheels are slipping. The machine feels slow and sluggish. Straighten up the machine. Now, all the force from the wheels is in line with the bucket, resulting in maximum penetrating force. For load and carry operation, make a habit of shaking the bucket with the tilting function so that any excess material falls off. In this way, you prevent stones from falling off the bucket. Keep the bucket tilted fully rearward and approximately 30 to 40 centimeters, approximately a foot, above the ground. If your machine is fitted with boom suspension system, you have to raise the bucket a bit further so that the tilt link doesn't rest against the mechanical stop. This is to give the bucket room to move up or down. During load and carry and travel, the gear selector position A is recommended. When the boom suspension system is activated, the machine will operate smoother. The system damps vibrations and improves your comfort, which in turn makes you a more efficient operator. The BSS is automatically disengaged when first gear is engaged and again automatically engaged when a shift to second gear takes place. On the C-Series machines, the gear selector should be in position 4 and the mode selector set to heavy. The boom suspension system should be set in the gear-dependent position. Make sure that the ground where you have to drive is even and free of larger stones. Always keep safety in mind when transporting. You'll always lose material from a bucket which is too full. Read more in the operator's manual under Transporting Load. When transporting loads using a timber grapple, the boom suspension system together with the gear selector in position A will allow the machine to be operated in a smooth and stable way. When picking up or depositing a load, the boom suspension system should be deactivated. For the C-Series machines, we recommend that the gear selector should be in position 4 and the shift mode selector in the normal or either of the light settings. You should also select the speed-dependent function for the boom suspension system. You have to take care not to damage timber during handling. Here we'll demonstrate timber handling at a sawmill. Before depositing the grapple load on the sorting table, you should begin to raise the grapple in good time, avoiding having to brake to reach the correct lifting height. As shown here, you carefully lay the logs down at the same time as you open the clamp. Reverse carefully. Use the lever for the third and fourth function to open and close the clamp. Before inserting the grapple into the stack, place it with the tines flat on the ground and then push them in under the logs. The clamp should be fully open. Kickdown is normally not used, as the machine then becomes too strong and may damage the timber. Carefully reverse while at the same time alternately tilting and closing the clamp. In the case of a high stack, insert the tines near the top of the stack. In all handling of timber, you have to work with the greatest care. The large clearance radius in combination with limited visibility could easily lead to the causing of accidents in the vicinity of the machine. If you're not used to handling timber, ask a signalman for help. We will now show you how to unload timber from a vehicle. Open the clamp and tilt the grapple forward. Carefully insert the tines of the grapple between the logs and gradually close the clamp and begin tilting upward. Alternate between closing the clamp and tilting the grapple rearward, while at the same time slowly moving forward to compensate for the rearward tilting. Take care not to damage the vehicle's stakes while filling the grapple. When unloading logs in a stack, keep the grapple as close to the stack as possible to prevent logs from falling down. Lay the grapple down against the stack and carefully open the clamp. Tilt the grapple forward to allow the logs to roll out in a controlled way. Carefully reverse, while at the same time lowering the grapple. The basic rule is that the logs should roll out of the grapple without falling down onto the stack. When picking up the last logs from the vehicle, take extra care not to damage the vehicle. If you're not used to handling timber and you don't have a feeling for the position of the clamp, get the signalman to help you. We've now shown you the basics of work with a timber grapple. This requires extra feeling for the job and great care. With the hydraulic attachment bracket, you can quickly change from one attachment to another. All the operations can be done from the cab. Before connecting the attachment, make sure that the locking pins in the attachment bracket have been retracted. This is done in two stages with these switches. The switches have safety catches to prevent accidental activation, which would unlock the fitted attachment. First activate this switch, and then this. Increase the engine speed slightly, and when the indicator points are down, the attachment can be connected to the bracket. Tilt forward approximately 15 degrees and lower the lifting arms. Align the upper attaching points on the bracket with those on the attachment. Lift and tilt rearward until the attachment is level. Now, lock the attachment in this order with the switches. The indicator points should be pointing straight up when the attachment is locked. As a safety measure, tilt the attachment forward and check that it's securely locked to the bracket. Raise the front wheels, pressing the attachment against the ground to make sure that the attachment is securely locked. To disconnect the attachment, hold it a bit above the ground. Activate the switches to retract the locking pins. Lower the bucket and reverse while tilting forward. A log grapple with a third hydraulic function is disconnected in this way. Close the grapple, stop the machine, move the selector to neutral and apply the parking brake. The pressure in the hoses is released with this switch. Stop the engine before you release the switch. On the C-Series machines, you can release pressure by moving the lever for the third hydraulic function to and fro a couple of times with the engine switched off. However, on the L70C, pressure is released by operating the appropriate switches. This will apply until the latter half of 1995. Read more about this in the operator's manual. The pressure in the hoses for the log grapple has now been released, and the hoses can be disconnected from the machine. Never knock on a difficult quick-action coupling when connecting or disconnecting an attachment. Position the hoses in the intended place on the attachment, which will keep them protected from dirt and damage. Now disconnect the attachment in the same way as we showed for the bucket. Retract the locking pins, lower the lifting arms at the same time as you tilt forward. Before excavating and stripping topsoil, begin by removing larger stones and stumps. When removing topsoil, make sure that the ground the machine stands on is as even as possible. Operate in second gear and use kickdown for maximum rim pull. Gradually lift the bucket to increase the pressure on the front axle. This reduces the risk of the front wheel slipping. On C-Series machines, the gear selector should be in position 2 and the mode selector in the normal setting. The boom suspension system should be deactivated. Engage the differential lock in order to utilize maximum power. Make sure that the wheels are not slipping when you engage the differential lock. To further level the ground, make sure you have material in the bucket. This will automatically fill any hollows in front of the machine. When finishing off the leveling operation, strive to keep the machine as horizontal as possible and stop the bucket from cutting in. Use the float position to level out small bumps and hollows. You have created an even and level surface at the correct depth as a starting point for further excavation. The suitable gear selected position for handling pallets is A. On the C-Series machines, the gear selector should be in position 4 and the mode selector set to either of the light positions depending on the type of work. The boom suspension system should be activated and the gear-dependent function selected. When handling pallets, They should be carried like this when transporting, as far in on the tines as possible. If the fork tines are too long, use this technique. If the tines protrude on the other side of the pallet, lower it to the ground and change the grip to prevent damage to the sides of the truck. Lift the pallet in over the platform. If you push the pallet with the fork tines, there's a risk that you damage the goods or the pallet. You may also damage the platform on the truck. Here it's extra important that the tines don't protrude at the back of the pallet. Even in this case, change grip before you lift the pallet into position. When carrying, keep the fork at a height of approximately 30 to 40 centimeters, that's about 1 foot above the ground. This gives a stable carrying position and the best possible visibility. Only operate with the load raised when picking up or delivering a pallet or when stacking. Make a habit of approaching with the machine straight when picking up or putting down a pallet. This gives you a better view on either side of the pallet and better stability if the load is heavy. If you're handling large loads, make a rule of always reversing away. From your operator's position, you can't see what's behind the pallet. When you're reversing the machine, keep the load low and look carefully behind the machine. If you carry another attachment or other items in the bucket for a longer distance, make sure the load is securely tied down. The boom suspension system should be activated, and on the C-Series machines, the gear-dependent function should be selected. For further information about transporting, see the owner's manual and make sure that you follow the regulations applying for your country. We'll now change attachment and deal with a material handling arm. Only a material handling arm which has been approved for use with a particular machine should be used to observe local and national regulations. Check that the attachment is securely locked and that the pins in the boom are secured in a safe way. Carefully read the section in the operator's manual about the material handling arm. Permissible maximum loads at specified reaches are also shown on the attachment itself. Operate the machine and the material handling arm slowly and with small, gentle movements so that the load doesn't start to swing. Maximum speed of less than 6 kilometers an hour is recommended. A small movement at the attachment bracket becomes a rapid movement at the outer end of the material handling arm. Take extra care about where and how you position the machine. The ground should be even and firm so that the wheel can't sink into the ground. The most suitable gear selector position for operating with a material handling arm is A. During this kind of work with a C-Series machine, we recommend that the gear selector is set in position 4 and the mode selector in position light. The boom suspension system should be disengaged for greater precision. To get the best possible view of the load, work with the lifting arms in a high position and lower with the tilting function. Have safety uppermost in your mind when you operate the machine and attachment near other people. It's not the productivity, but personal safety which comes first. Here it's the cooperation between the operator and his colleague which produces a good result. If you're going to transport the machine on a public road with the attachment fitted, the arm should be shortened as much as possible. Don't forget to make the attachment safe with the locking pins before moving off. Here we fitted one of our smaller loaders with a snow blade. Its traversability is good, it's flexible and powerful. The large curved windshield allows good visibility over the edges of the blade so that you can operate fairly close to cars and other obstacles. The same applies when you're using a bucket. Under extreme conditions, you can improve safety and productivity by fitting snow chains. Suitable gear selector position is A. On the C-Series machines, it's recommended that the gear selector is set in position 4 and the mode selector in position heavy. On machines with single-acting lifting function, make a habit of switching this function on and deactivating the boom suspension system when you're using a snow blade. This is particularly important when operating at higher speeds and when the ground is uneven. This prevents the blade from hitting the ground and being thrown up in an uncontrolled manner. In this case, it's very important to wear a seatbelt. We've now gone through the basic rules for operating with the most common Volvo attachments. There are many more attachments that can be fitted to our machines. They're described in our attachment catalogs. If you follow the hints and instructions which we've shown in this video, we believe you'll find enjoyment as an operator and feel satisfied when working behind the wheel in a Volvo loader. We wish you the best of luck in your daily work.